You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything. Interviews from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s with voices from the past.
Everyone's so related to him, and I think that's why people loved him, is that he was so truthful and so brought those people alive that you just wanted to laugh with him and hug him.
Rain Pryor, daughter of Richard Pryor. Today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. The late Richard Pryor was a hugely talented comedian and a brilliant performer, but by his own admission, a failure as a father. His daughter, Rain Pryor, might disagree. In 2006, she wrote a memoir, a sympathetic portrait of her father, failings and all. So here now, from November 2006, Rain Pryor.
There's been so much that has been written, not just in the tabloids, but by authors of books that just... sometimes they mean to, maybe they don't. They just get it wrong sometimes.
I think they get it wrong a lot of the times. I mean, from what I've read. And it's funny. It's like even a book that my dad sort of, it was the Prior Convictions book. He didn't really write it, so it wasn't even in his voice and his vernacular and had his feel to it. I mean, there were some things even in that I felt you could have gotten it, a little bit better.
Sometimes it takes somebody else to be able to see what's really going on in your life.
Well, I also think it takes, the most perspective. Like I look at it, the kids have the best perspective of the man they grew up with. And especially the older ones, we really did spend a lot of time with him. So I think we have a different perception of what it was like to be his daughter and to see him in his fame as well.
This is necessarily then a book not just about you, but about him, about your mother, about your half siblings, the other wives. There's a lot of people that this book is about.
Absolutely a lot of people that the book is about, and I think that's the way it needed to be balanced. And rather than just tell a tell-all celebrity book, which I didn't want to do, I really wanted to be able to tell a story about a love for a father and the fact that he happens to be Richard Pryor and what that was like, and dealing with my mom and dealing with racism and dealing with brothers and sisters that had different mothers, and go through that.
You mentioned a moment ago the particular vernacular that you have a unique vernacular that maybe most kids wouldn't be growing up with. I mean, the book is very frankly written, and I'm thinking, well, I say that only because there might be some people who think, all right, she's Richard Pryor's daughter, so she's saying these things to shock us, but that's not what your intent was.
Not at all. I think I'm telling you the things that actually happened. I mean, nothing in there is for shock value, that's for sure. I mean, I'm not that kind of person anyway. I think I'm telling you the way it was told to me and to set the scene so you understand what it was like. I mean, I think to write a book, especially about growing up with Richard Pryor, you sort of have to live in that space with me for a moment, otherwise it sounds like I'm removed from it, not truthful. So.
Well, you mentioned at one point that it was about the time, I guess, you were entering kindergarten, that you began to feel maybe your life would turn out kind of normal after all.
Well, yeah, a little bit, because all of a sudden now I had a mom and a dad. Do you know what I mean? And it sort of fit the picture of sort of what you see around you when you were going to school at that time. But again, it was just like, mostly in my head, because still, every parent was like, you either had white or you had black. You didn't have mixed parents, and your mom didn't think she was a black militant like my mom did, and your dad wasn't the most famous person that everybody, everyone's parents is like, oh, we love your dad. And you're like, you do? Why? It's your daddy too.
This is where your book becomes very poignant, because at one you use the line in there somewhere about, and I'm paraphrasing you poorly, that you would love him better if you didn't know him.
Right. But I think that at times it's true. I mean, I even wrote him a letter that's in my book when I was really angry at him one time, saying if she really knew who you were, nobody would love you. And I think, that's the truth of when you grow up like that and you have that kind of angst. That I think people know people on the surface, and especially celebrity, you know them on the surface, but what about what goes on underneath? You don't really get to see that ever. It's like when people fall in love with, a Tom Cruise or a Jude Law, what they're falling in love with is the persona that was created about them, not the person. Yeah.
It's a unique kind of parent-child love, because you see him for who he is and you love him anyway.
Absolutely, and I think that's also the healthier choice. I mean, I think we spend a lot of time, especially as kids or even grown adults, wanting to change our parents and make them behave the way we want them to behave. And I think there comes a point where you realize they're just not, either they can't change, or you have to be willing to let go and forgive them, and love them anyway. And it's like, I think that's what I chose to do rather than drive myself crazy.
Now, is this a book that your mother would rather you not have written?
Of course it is. Of course it's a book my mother would have not. My mom has a very private life, and she likes it that way, and she even changed her last name so she wouldn't have to be associated with Richard Pryor. And here it is, her daughter, is writing this book, and she's in it, and it's very overwhelming. But at the same time, she's also like, well, if you didn't, someone else would. But I think it's difficult anyway, even though, because it was difficult for me to write about her, to write even about my dad, to write about stuff that went on. I think that it in itself is just, it's hard to do. So. And I think the book is written in a way that nothing I wrote was in a way to hurt someone or to slander someone or to, have them have to retreat back. I think it's actually a real book about love and understanding that, there were times when they were really crazy and out of control. But I think I think I'm pretty great, and I think they raised a really great kid out of that nuttiness. They did their best, and just like I think my grandparents, come off well, although they struggled at the beginning with me, and I think it all works out in the end.
Your book may contain, I think, the most honest, the most straightforward, the most here it is, make of it what you will account of your father's suicide attempt.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. A lot of people didn't know. They think it's an accident. I mean, we all thought it was an accident. And I remember him being on stage talking about it was milk and cookies. But then I also realized, here I am 12 years old and he's telling me, that he tried to attempt suicide and kill himself because he was in so much pain, and the heaviness of that you carry on with you.
Are you better able to understand what he was going through now than you did then?
Oh, completely. I think, hopefully, I mean, as I grow up and I understand him as a man and realize where he came from and the struggles he went through, and also watching his surroundings. I talk, even in the book, I mentioned the fact that maybe my dad was bipolar as well, because watching his moods and watching what he had to go through at the time, I can understand him wanting to take his own life and wanting to end it.
But as you point out, and again, we have to keep things in perspective, not only was he at his career peak at that point, but he had just lost Mama.
Absolutely. He just lost the love of his life, which was his grandmother who raised him, Mama, and the one person, other than I think myself, that could tell him, you're messing up, or this is what's wrong, why are you doing this? And he really had a lot of belief and a lot of faith that Mama always sort of somehow pulled him through, even though, at times, he even tells it in one of his acts about doing drugs and Mama finding the drugs and throwing them out and then trying to go get them when she realized how much they cost, and that was sort of like, how Mama was, but it was a big influence on his life. And so to lose her was devastating, and money and things don't fix that. That doesn't fix that kind of pain. I
do remember from one of his stand-up routines that he did this absolutely pitch-perfect impression of like a 6-year-old being caught having broken a vase or something like that. Did he get that from just observing you and your siblings?
Yes, he definitely got that from me and my siblings. Yes, because I was that child. That was my incident, and yes. Because I always like, well, it wasn't really me, but it was me, but
You mean the famous one where the punchline to his gag is, that was broke before I was even born?
No, I think the punchline definitely was his, but
But it was just, you look at his face when he's doing those lines, and you're thinking, this is a 6-year-old's face I'm seeing. He was just totally plastic in his ability to be anybody.
Genius mimic, and that's the beauty of, of the work that he did, is that he was able to really embrace people and bring them alive on the stage. And that's what sets him. It's funny. He's not your traditional. People refer to him as a stand-up comic, and he's not even your traditional stand-up. He's a storyteller. But everyone's so related to him, and I think that's why people loved him. Is that he was so truthful and so brought those people alive that you just wanted to laugh with him and hug him.
That comes back to what you said a moment ago, that's the persona that people fell in love with.
Absolutely. But it is and it isn't. When he would get dark, it's like recently, which is funny, like doing a lot of the book touring stuff, a lot of people have all these old clips, and some of them are really dark, where my dad is his dark, and it's kind of yucky, and you're like, and I sit there and go, yeah, that was That was him. That was him on that side. And then there was, out of that, people laugh, and the humor, because they either laugh because they're uncomfortable, but he knew how to sort of play that, you know? Yeah.
He was very good at making me uncomfortable but laugh at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, this is your first book, is it not?
Yes, it is my very first book.
But you're not a first-time writer. I mean,
I created my solo show that I wrote myself, Fried Chicken and Latkes, which won an award and was nominated actually for a script, which was amazing. But it's like, I look at this, it lost out to the woman who wrote Top Dog Underdog. So come on, it's like, I'm okay with that because she's amazing, But yeah, this is the first book, that I've ever really written.
You included a couple of some lines from Fried Chicken and Latkes near the back of this book. Did I happen to see in some of those lines some of the experiences you had when you were a little girl?
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, like almost word for word, some of the scenes.
Yes, you did.
So but you have apparently the ability that he had to be able to turn whatever has happened to you in your life into material. Yes, it's funny, but it's also poignant, and it hits home, and it touches us. You've apparently inherited that.
I think I thank you, and I also think it's true. I have inherited that, because one of the things, even with him and my mom, it was always about truth. You had to be truthful, and you also had to write what you know. Instead of trying to make it up at first, it's like that comes later on, but it really was about write what you know and stay truthful. And out of that, it's like when I wrote my solo show, I thought I was seriously writing a dramatic piece of solo theater. And I did it, and people fell out hysterically laughing. I'm like, you're laughing at my pain? It's that funny? I'm like thinking I'm being serious here. And I realized I had a comedy show. And I'm like, well, I thought this was heavy stuff, Did
that hurt your feelings initially?
No. I realized it's funny. I realized that was the gift of my parents gave me, was to write my truth. And for some reason, people, you know what I mean? People are going to laugh at it, And it was actually relaxing, because it was like, oh, so maybe it's not as bad. It's bad, but it's not bad, Will
people just look at this and say, all right, it's different from the childhood I had, but you know what? You turned, like you said a moment, you turned out okay.
I think the response has been that, it's definitely different than the childhood. I think people also have been relating to it. And that's what I really love. People are inspired by it. I had a woman write me an email saying she read my book and she was in tears, and now she's going to send her dad a copy of the book so maybe they can have a dialogue and talk to one another. And I just thought that's what, you know what I mean? I think we all have that in our families. We have some level of dysfunction, and if you can relate to it, then you have a good book, as opposed to just writing about a celebrity and saying, well, he did this and this and this and this and this. For me, that would be kind of dull. And I thought it would be more interesting to sort of really tell the story about the relationships.
And now you're working very hard against MS.
Very hard with MS, and fighting for a cure, and work a lot with the National MS Society, and trying to even take that to different levels. I do a lot of work to raise money for research, because I'm very involved, and I want to find a cure. I really want to help people, not just when my father was going through it, but the people I meet now that have MS. I mean, I'm starting to meet children with MS, and how important that is to me, that we do something. It's definitely a mission of mine, and if celebrity is what it takes to put a face on something like that, then that's what I want to, do. Why not?
Rain Pryor is 54 now and is still active as an actress, comedian, and singer. Now you can get a copy of Jokes My Father Never Taught Me by Rain Pryor by tapping on the link in our show notes, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you'll also find my 1994 interview with the brother of another well-known comedian who died too soon, Sam Kinison, my interview with his brother Bill Kinison.
Sam never ever wrote a routine. He never sat down and wrote a routine. Everything he did was either his viewpoints, which many times were politically incorrect, or was his life experiences.
And my 1990 conversation with John Belushi's widow, Judith Belushi.
I think most people who think of John, they don't even think of him as married. When I would be buying something with a credit card or whatever, they'd go, oh, are you John Belushi's sister? I kept thinking, why did I think that? But I think it's because that's just the first thought they'd have. I was clearly not his mother.
And of course, as you know, we post new episodes of Now We've Heard Everything here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, she was related by marriage to one of the world's most notorious terror masterminds. My 2004 conversation with the former sister-in-law of Osama bin Laden, Carmen bin Laden.
You know, it's not easy to have Western value, to have been brought up with Western value, and to have the name associated with terror and destruction.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.